never thought my own sister would be the reason I almost lost everything. 3 years ago, I moved to Chicago for a better job. The city was expensive, but I found a decent apartment in a nice neighborhood. The rent was manageable, and for the first time in my life, I felt financially stable. Then one day, my younger sister Emily called me in tears. She had just gone through a terrible breakup and claimed she had nowhere else to go. She begged me to let her stay with me for a few months until she could get back on her feet. Because she was family, I didn't hesitate. I told her she could move in, believing I was doing the right thing. At first, everything seemed normal. Emily promised she would help with groceries, contribute to the bills, and respect my home. But within a few weeks, it became clear that none of those promises meant anything. She never paid for food, never offered money for utilities, and constantly left the apartment a mess. Whenever I tried to bring it up, she always had an excuse. She said she was looking for work, dealing with stress, or trying to rebuild her life. I wanted to believe her, so I kept giving her chances. As the months went by, things got worse. Emily started inviting friends over almost every night. Loud music blasted through the walls, strangers filled the apartment, and neighbors began complaining. I worked long hours and often came home late, so I didn't realize how bad things had become until my landlord called me directly. He sounded angry and informed me that multiple complaints had been filed against my apartment. There had been reports of loud parties, smoking, and even damage to common areas of the building. I was shocked because I barely spent time at home. The landlord warned me that another complaint could put my lease in danger. That evening, I confronted Emily. Instead of apologizing, she accused me of being controlling. She acted as if I was the problem and claimed she was simply trying to enjoy herself. I should have kicked her out right then, but I didn't. I convinced myself she would eventually grow up and take responsibility. Looking back, that was the biggest mistake I ever made. A few weeks later, I received an official notice from the property management company. My lease renewal had been denied because of repeated violations connected to my apartment. The building had documented noise complaints, unauthorized guests, smoking violations, and property damage. I immediately contacted management and tried explaining that I wasn't responsible for what had happened. I showed them my work schedules and proved that I was often away during the incidents. Unfortunately, none of that mattered. The lease was under my name, and legally, I was responsible for everything that happened in the unit. Desperate to avoid losing my home, I pleaded for another chance. After several meetings and countless phone calls, management finally agreed to let me stay. However, there was a catch. Because they now considered me a high-risk tenant, they would only offer me a new lease under a different category. When they told me the new monthly rent, I nearly fainted. The amount was $8,100 per month. My previous rent had been less than half of that. There was absolutely no way I could afford it. I felt sick. Years of hard work, saving money, and building stability had been destroyed. That night, I sat down with Emily and explained exactly what had happened. I expected her to feel guilty, or at least show some concern. Instead, she shrugged and said something I will never forget. She looked me in the eye and said, "That's not really my problem." In that moment, something inside me changed. I had spent years helping her, lending her money, defending her choices, and supporting her through every crisis. Yet when I needed accountability, she acted as if none of it mattered. The next morning, I scheduled a meeting with an attorney. I gathered every text message, email, complaint notice, and document related to the situation. I also collected evidence showing that Emily had been living in the apartment and hosting parties while I was away. The attorney reviewed everything and told me I had more options than I realized. For the first time in months, I felt a small sense of hope. Over the following weeks, I worked tirelessly to build my case. I gathered security footage, statements from neighbors, copies of complaint reports, and screenshots from Emily's social media accounts where she openly bragged about throwing parties. The evidence was overwhelming. Meanwhile, Emily continued living as though nothing had happened. She believed I would keep protecting her no matter what. She had no idea what was coming. Eventually, I served her with a formal notice requiring her to leave the apartment. She laughed when she received it. She told family members that I was being dramatic and unreasonable. Soon, relatives started calling me, insisting that I should forgive her because family comes first. I listened patiently, and then asked each person the same question. Are you willing to pay my $8,100 monthly rent? Every conversation ended the same way. Complete silence. When the deadline arrived, Emily refused to leave. I had no choice but to continue through the legal process. Once court proceedings began, her confidence disappeared. The judge reviewed complaint records, witness statements, financial losses, and evidence connecting her directly to the violations. Emily tried blaming everyone else. She blamed the neighbors, the landlord, and even me. But the facts were undeniable. The court ultimately ruled in my favor and ordered her to vacate the property. That was only the beginning. My attorney also pursued compensation for the financial damage she had caused. We documented lease penalties, increased housing costs, and property-related expenses. During the case, even more evidence surfaced showing that Emily had knowingly ignored warnings and continued hosting unauthorized gatherings. Faced with overwhelming proof, she eventually agreed to a settlement. While the money didn't completely erase my losses, it forced her to finally experience consequences for her actions. The reaction from the family was fascinating. Many of the relatives who had originally defended Emily changed their opinions once they saw the evidence. Some apologized for judging me too quickly. Others simply stopped talking about the situation altogether. By that point, I no longer cared what anyone thought. The experience had taught me a lesson I would never forget. Being related to someone does not give them the right to destroy your life. A few months later, I moved into a new apartment. It wasn't luxurious, and it certainly wasn't perfect, but it gave me something I hadn't experienced in a very long time: peace. There were no surprise parties, no endless arguments, and no constant stress hanging over my head. For the first time in years, I could finally focus on rebuilding my life. As for Emily, the last thing I heard was that she had moved in with another relative. Apparently, she was already causing problems there as well. Some people never learn from their mistakes. But that was no longer my concern. The day she told me that my problems were not her responsibility was the day I realized her problems were no longer mine either. It was an incredibly expensive lesson, but it was also one of the most valuable lessons I have ever learned. In the end, losing money hurt, but gaining my freedom was worth far more than anything she ever took from me.